documentary that it's called like The Journey of Life, I think. That's from cut footage of Tree of Life that I really want to see, but haven't seen it yet.
Huh. Yeah. What about like for instance, The Shining's coming out in 4K? Is that something to go see? I mean, I love The Shining, so I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. Well,
how do you feel about that? I mean, having them come back out with.
I would need to know more, but I'm always a fan of of restorations whenever possible. But it's interesting that you bring that up though, because I've actually been digitizing my DVD library. I've been meaning to do so for a while, so I set up a media server, and I'm slowly building this media server, and I had Star Wars episodes 4 and 5 on DVD in the release from 2006, and I remember buying them because they had the original theatrical version, but was disappointed when I bought them initially because they were actually sourced from the Laserdisc from 1993, and they actually weren't sourced from the original print. Gotcha. So it was as close as you could get to the original print, but not really, right?
Yeah, you could tell the difference.
Yeah, and so it was non-anthropomorphic, and it was and so I had done I wanted to follow up and see what histories there were, because there's always these unofficial changes that they make, and fans sort of recalculate what. Or not recalculate, but they rescan and re-edit the films to be kind of of their liking, right? Because there's a sort of animosity to George. Sure. George is ruining his own work, right. So to speak. Yeah. And so the culmination of that is what I learned actually just last night. There's something called this declassified edition, and so it actually sources from multiple different sources that have different strengths to create the version that is, I'm air quoting right now for the listeners. Yeah. The version that is the highest definition possible, that is also sourced to the original version of the film. And I thought it was interesting because the original version of the film is such a it's like a whack-a-mole, right? There is no original version, right? So there's the original version is not something that I think people would even remember when they see, and then the different generations that have seen the film fell in love with different versions of that film, and so they'll see the CGI animals, and they'll associate with that, and I thought that cultivating these these films and artifacts in these ways to sort of shape your own mold is what they're actually doing, and not really creating an original vision of that. And so I was thinking about that and I thought it was particularly interesting for Star Wars in general. I think that's it's a unique story, but that is a long-winded way of me basically contextualizing that I think 4K restorations I'm always for and think it's really cool, but I think the devil's in the details, right? Yeah, so I'd be curious to see what was and was not left out, right, or put in. If it's a 4K restoration, then I assume that it's only going to be noise taken out, and and them going through the actual print, and taking out any sort of digital noise that would have been taken from a scan of the print, because maybe the print doesn't exist anymore. Hopefully the print still exists. I generally don't know,
right.
But I think it's a complicated subject, but in general, yeah, I'm very much pro it, because it means that we care about these older films, preservation, but I think that we need to be clear that when we preserve a film, we are also
preserving it in its authenticity or whatever.
Well, yeah, there's a sense of that we're actually creating something new a little bit. That when we're in its preservation, right? There's going to be a generation, a good point to this is that I think for a lot of people who grew up older millennials and maybe some older Generation Z people, like who had who had like older brothers and sisters, whatever, might remember older films on like VHS, and then older millennials still will remember films that were actually projected through film, right, in a movie theater, and then of course older generations remember all of the changes in technology, right? But for newer generations, so for these these older generations and millennials, older millennials and things like that, there's to a certain extent there might be like a sense of nostalgia for the film grain and noise and things like that to the experience of like watching a film, and to newer generations that doesn't exist. Right. Like they can't feel nostalgic for that, right?
Yeah, they don't.
They can only feel nostalgic for a high definition version. So in a way, restoring films to like resemble the kind of like high definition quality, that people have, or that people are used to, rather, especially new people. Is a way to preserve them for future audiences. That's
true,
right?
Yeah,
and I think that's like really, really valuable too. But there's also a sense of like losing something too. Maybe, I don't know. It's a very like complicated subject, but that's a long, complicated answer to a very simple question. I'm excited to see this 4K, shining thing. I'm excited to see any digital restoration of a film.
Of a great
for sure.
film for sure, right? I mean,
but I'll be honest too. Like, whenever I can see something on film, I try to.
Yeah.
But I'm also not a purist when it comes to that. If it means seeing a film, digitally versus not seeing it at all, I'll definitely see it digitally, of course.
Yeah. You mentioned, older siblings, whatever, introducing movies to younger siblings. Like, how did you get involved in movies? I know that's a long question, but like,
that might be another episode. Yeah, we should go back and forth to that.
But like, can you remember the first movie that hit you hard? Like you were like, oh my god, what is this?
Yeah. So, well, when I was really young, I wasn't really into movies.
Okay.
So I remember my parents dragging me to see. Dragging, like this, that's such a loaded,
No,
but
we've all got our parents dragging us somewhere.
When you're a kid, you're dragged, right? You're always dragged.
That's the perfect verb.
Yeah. Even to a place you want to go to, you're dragged.
Exactly.
Right. No, I was quote dragged to see Austin Powers. They really wanted to see Austin Powers.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
And I didn't know anything about this movie. I was a kid, hadn't seen trailers for whatever.
Right.
And was like, oh, like whatever, and then I saw it and like, loved it. I thought it was like the funniest thing. And so that didn't really like spark like a movie love or whatever, but it was like my first major movie memory, because a lot of my movie loving DNA, comes from my grandfather and his love of Mel Brooks and those older Mel Brooks movies.
Okay.
But I would say, for my personal experience and my personal relationship with films, it all started when I was like 12 or 13, and I think wanted to be. When I was a teenager, I always wanted to be older.
Me too. I was an old soul.
Yeah, I was never.
I wanted to hang out with the older kids.
Yeah, and even now, like I don't have the other end where like I want to be younger again. I'm fine being the way
Right.
Like, so I always want to be old and new from the beginning. But and so like and to my mind, part of being old was also being like culturally sophisticated or something, right? Was right. So I'm like, okay, what are like what are some ways I can like do that? And so I went to Blockbuster, and they had like a small section for art house and independent films and things like that. And I remember seeing they had Seven Samurai and the Werner Herzog film A Great Wrath of God.
Okay.
And rented those, and that changed my life forever.
Oh wow!
Since
That's cool.
then, yeah. And
thank God for Blockbuster, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that really was a gold mine for. I mean, as far as cultural, I mean, you could go get any movie you wanted.
Yeah.
And I mean, we still can, but like, I don't know, they're there for your display. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There's a difference.
Well, like
they opened your eyes, I guess.
One of the things that I really liked about Blockbuster was like the anticipation factor of you going there and you wanting to see the film that like when a popular film came out, you would see the boxes and they'd all be empty, and then but maybe there'd be one box that had a case behind the cover, right?
Right.
I'd be like, oh my God, we got it, so like
Right.
so the disappointment and the satisfaction, like playing around of like whether or not you'd even be able to get it.
Right.
Was
Not to mention the fact that I'm sure this happened, but I don't know of a specific instance where you went in for one thing, it wasn't available, and then you got something else which you totally liked, which you never would have got had you know what I'm saying? Had you been not disappointed at getting the first thing you wanted. So
no, that's
like the secondary
that's a super
choice
good point. Yeah.
was like something, like I think I got District 9 because of that.
Really?
Like I went in for something else and rented this, which I never probably would have seen otherwise, and it was profound. It was amazing to me.
What was the film that you were trying to get?
I don't remember. I was something for my son because he was probably 16, 17 years old, so I was looking for some sci-fi thing.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, well, I'll get this instead. And it was like, wow,
really
look
liked
at
it, yeah.
this.
That's a super good point. And so I think something's like a little bit lost with that. But at the same time, one of the things that I try to do is, at Blockbuster, they didn't have every movie, right? Like
Right.
they, in a way that like you even could now, like if you have, a few of the subscription services, you can kind of find everything that you want. Like
Yeah.
I have the Criterion Collection, Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, and like between the four of them, they don't have everything. Or sorry, like each one doesn't have everything, but between the four of them, I can get most of what I want. It's still missing like a few things that you could find at Blockbuster. But one of the things that I liked about Blockbuster was the sense of artificial scarcity, right? So,
Right.
in addition to just like the films that you want not being there, there are also just films that like just weren't there that
Right.
you maybe like wanted, and so what I try to do in the streaming world now is like I like when streaming services have a like, because they have to they're constantly rotating their libraries or whatever.
Right.
I like choosing a list of films that are like about to leave, right? Because then I have like, oh, okay. In a world where I could theoretically get anything, paralyzed, right?
Right.
But in a world in which like I can only get like a few things, I can, okay, no, this is what I want to see right now, right?
Right.
So I try to, metaphorically bring that aspect of Blockbuster and that experience to streaming in that way.
Right.
It's me playing a game, of course, but
Right.
But how did you get into film?
My mom dragged me to to the drive-in to see A Star Is Born when I was 13 with Barbra Streisand, because she was in love with Chris Christopherson, my mom. And she's like, don't tell your father we're going to an R-rated movie. And so I thought it was kind of cool in a way, like,
Yeah.
we were outlaws. And I love the movie, and I think that's why that's such a nostalgic thing for me, that Lady Gaga and Brad Cooper were like, what? I couldn't really.
You couldn't get into
I
it?
couldn't buy it. I couldn't buy it.
Do you? Yeah. Is there?
I think it's because of that original viewing. It was so special. That,
Of the three, which one is your favorite? The Barbra Streisand, Chris Christopherson one?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I just recently saw, like in the last like couple months or so, the Lady Gaga one.
Yeah.
I didn't see when it came out, unfortunately, but I had seen. I rewatched in anticipation of seeing those three. The first two.
Sure.
And actually the first one that the Judy Garland one was based off of too. I don't know. I thought it was fine.
I like the first half. I don't know. Something got lost. with me.
It wasn't so much. I don't know. I think I just got the sense. I don't know. There's something.
to go into melodrama from me, but again, I think the '76 one had melodrama too. I just didn't realize it because I was so young.
You know what I think it is too is that like there's also a sense of like. Like with respect to Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga, who are like megastars, I don't. The